What's up, folks, and welcome to Indie Showcase. Listen, I can quit playing these shmups anytime I want, okay? No, that's not true. I really can't. I don't know. These just keep coming, man, and I still think this is great. It seems we're having a little bit of a renaissance in shmups lately, and I think this is wonderful. So this may look a little familiar to you right now, and that's because this is another re-release of a Genesis shmup by the same developer who did Gleylancer, which we covered recently. And I apologize in advance because I'm going to murder this name. It's either Gynoug or Gynoug. I don't know how you say it, honestly. But this is from the same developer of the original Genesis game and also the same company re-releasing it. But it's quite a bit of a different title. For starters, this one actually did come out in North America back in the day, whereas Gleylancer did not. Secondly, this one doesn't... It has a little bit of a story to it. It's like a 2-sentence blurb on its Wikipedia page. That's really all I could find, but there's no real storytelling in the game, per se. It's, again, like the other one, not on PC. I don't get why. I really don't. But there was a section in the Gleylancer video where I talk about sort of the wrapper, I guess you'd say, and the various options it provides for this console iteration. So this is basically the same thing, so I'm not going to really go into detail about that here. Similar thing, you've got a few different video filters, a couple of different wallpapers that you can do. There is a rewind function. You can adjust the speed of that if you like, which is pretty cool. And unlike the other game where you had to unlock cheats, they're just available in this, straight up. I don't actually know if this affects achievements or not. The achievements in this game, well, this game will take you no time at all, the 100% if you're into that sort of thing. So there is that, and you have save states as well. It's somewhat bare bones, but it has all the basics that you need. So that's pretty cool. So yeah, I finished this game much like I did with Gleylancer, and I enjoy them both for sure. I'm going to say that this one is definitely not as hard as Gleylancer. At least not as hard as Gleylancer gets, but it's definitely no pushover neither. There's no doubt about that. So there is a separate in-game options menu as well, which allows you to change the actual game difficulty, as well as the number of lives that you get as well. Like I said, I don't know if any of these things affect achievements or not, but you can just play the game bog stock using the rewind function and get every achievement in this very, very easily. So if I was going to compare this game to anything, I'd probably say its closest analog, though not really, is Legendary Wings, which was a game from Capcom for the arcades and the NES, which was like, it was like an ancient Greek shmup, basically. This is kind of like that, I guess, in that you have a character that kind of looks like that. I feel like this is probably what they were trying to ape when they made this thing, but it definitely has its own personality and its own style, and it's quite interesting. It has quite a number of different kinds of enemies in it that you wouldn't see in a lot of other games, including you saw some there that sort of attacked from behind. Not something you see in every game like this. You know, it's got a rather interesting power-up system, so those wings that you can pick up there affect your speed. And wow, I already died. Yeah, but of course, you know, you can just do this if you want. Now, the default rewind speed, as you can see, is somewhat slow, but you can speed this up if you so choose. And you have the option to pick up different kinds of power-ups that stack. So, or rather, operate sort of in a line. So you see there in the upper right corner, well, near the upper right corner, you have those 3 boxes. Well, every time you pick up different kinds of power-ups, they will end up in that in that section, and then you use them in order, basically, by pulling the left trigger in this case. So you can utilize those as you get them, and each one of those offers a different kind of power. They actually vary in effect quite a bit, and some offer very different kinds of protection or offensive capabilities. It's actually quite interesting, and you'll pick up these power orbs as you go along, which impacts the strength and power of your... Ooh, I missed a one up there. Which affects the strength and power of your primary weapon and the secondaries that you pick up along the way. And then you're going to run into a number of different bosses, which are actually quite inventive, I think. Both in terms of their looks and in terms of the attacks that they provide. You'll run into mid-level bosses as well as, you know, your sort of standard end-level bosses. And this game starts out relatively tame, but it will get much more challenging very quickly. I still don't think this gets as hard as Gleylancer does, though if you want to 1cc this, you're definitely in for a challenge. You're going to need to really put in some work to get good enough at this thing to do that. But overall, compared to some footage that I've seen of the original, it looks like they did a really good job with the emulation. And it seems like a solid package for sure. It's nice to see older, lesser-known shmups in particular getting re-releases. Like, we get the classics re-released on a regular basis, right? Like, you can buy Ikaruga on anything with a screen at this point. And Ikaruga's an amazing game, but it's very well known. And there are a lot of actually good shmups from the 16-bit era that a lot of people didn't know about. In some cases, like this one, because they only... Well, no, not like this one, because of Gleylancer, they only came out in Japan. And in other cases like this, because they were games that came out, often were published by fairly small companies who weren't able to put a lot of marketing muscle behind them, and few people outside the hardcore knew who they were. And if you want to buy your own copy of some of these more obscure games now, it's going to set you back a ways. And I like the fact that some of these smaller developers now seem to be finding a way to get access to the license for these older games so that they can be preserved and put out on modern platforms. So there we go. I got a different power up there. So this is the Aura Shield. Pretty obvious what this guy does, right? And you can see there, these power-ups have a limited amount of energy to them, which is ticked down up there. So you only get to use this thing temporarily. So definitely worth, you know, picking up the ones that you think are going to work best for you, and then also making sure you time them appropriately. Again, if you want to 1cc this game, or play it through on the harder difficulties with at least a minimal amount of continues, that kind of thing is going to be very much required of you. And yeah, the main reason I like covering these shmups in particular is because they're very interesting. You know, in the 16-bit era in particular, there was a lot of creativity in shmups, especially on home consoles, where they did have to be challenging, but they weren't designed to just suck money from you like a lot of the arcade ones did. And a lot of them pushed the hardware that they were on in some very interesting ways. Is this the most hardware-pushing Genesis game ever? Certainly not, but it does some very impressive things with it. I mean, some of the sprites for some of these enemies and stuff, right, are really kind of impressive. And it does some really interesting things. And I'm really happy to see these out there, because though shmup fans are definitely not as starved for new things to play in this day and age as we used to be, there's a lot of new shmups getting made now, which I think is just fantastic. There are a lot of really high-quality classic titles out there that many of us either were too young to experience at the time, or who just never got to play back in the day. I honestly didn't even know this game existed until this updated version of it came out, and I've been quite enjoying it. And you know, I think it's a really interesting shmup in its own right, and it's also just a really cool, more obscure sort of historical timepiece, right? This and Gleylancer in particular, because Gleylancer, again, never came out over here, and actually got a story remaster treatment as well, because that was a much more narrative-heavy game than this one. So I think it's great that we're seeing a lot of this, and I'll be honest with you, I've got a couple more games like this, not from this developer, but I've got a couple more games like this in the pipe to cover that are, again, old, more obscure shmups that are getting, you know, a modernization treatment, and it's great. And I hope that these do well, because if they do, they're going to hopefully send a signal to some other developers. You know, the AAA companies of the world are never going to care about this genre, but it might send the signal to some other small teams from Japan and otherwise that, you know, are into this type of thing, being like, hey, there's a fan base for this stuff out here. You know, kind of like what's happened with the boomer shooter genre, if you want, or what I call modern retro genre. I had an interesting conversation once with one of the guys from 3D Realms at a PAX where he said, we're not designing these games to sell millions of units. We're designing them to sell to a very hardcore fan base of 200,000 to 300,000 people. We make good money when on that number of sales for this genre, and it allows us to make stuff that's catered to them. We're not trying to go for broad appeal. We're not trying to be for everyone. We're making stuff that people who love this stuff will appreciate. And that was a really refreshing thing to hear. And I really feel that that's what the shmup genre has the potential to have as well, is to be that type of thing. And the success of titles like this, even if it's a modest success, shows that there is an audience out there for that. And obviously companies like this, you know, are making several different new releases, so they clearly see some potential in it too. So I hope these do well. And of course, I'm not just going to say buy every shmup that comes out, whether it's good or terrible, to quote support the cause. I do think it's important to show that there's a market for these things, but you got to support the stuff that's good, right? And this is, I think, it's, as you can tell by watching this playthrough, it's weird in a lot of cases. It's very, very strange in many ways. There we go. I wasn't using that Thunderbolt I had activated there. There we go. I will say the only thing about this is that when you have the rapid fire on for your main gun, it's a little much. Like, there's a lot of... It sort of fills the screen with a lot of very rapidly moving, you know, blue projectiles that can certainly be a little bit distracting. And I wish it was maybe not quite so prominent in that respect, but that's a minor gripe, to be honest with you. But yeah, I think this is a quality title. And yeah, it's a 16-bit game. Yeah, it's retro. You know, it's not a modern title, but it still plays really well. It's got, as you can see, very interesting enemies, very interesting level designs, some pretty cool weapons, and a fairly decent challenge later on as well. And I think it's been fun. The shmup scene is really popping off on PC, so it feels like a real missed opportunity to me that this and Gleylancer are not on PC. Maybe there's a technical reason, maybe it's a licensing reason. I know some Japanese companies are still very weird when it comes to PC, though that's thankfully starting to change. But I feel like porting these over to PC would be an almost non-issue, so I really hope that they're able to sort that out and get these over to Steam, because there's a market over there that would be all over this stuff, trust me, if you guys could get it there. And yeah, this is a half-decent length game as well. It's got, I believe it's 10 levels, and there is a good and a bad ending. That's all I'm going to say. And so there's replayability here as well, even if you're not someone who's into just 1cc in games. You know, for the price they're asking for this, I think you could one and done this and still have a half-decent time with it, to be honest with you. It is single-player only. There's no co-op, which is kind of a bummer. Gleylancer, well, Gleylancer could have been co-op too, I suppose, but this one I think definitely could have done that, especially with you know, given Legendary Wings was a co-op game, and Legendary Wings was so bloody hard, you pretty much had to play that co-op if you wanted to have a chance in hell at beating it. But that would have been nice with this one too. But you know what? Overall, I still think they did a pretty good job. And at any time, you can back up to the menus here, like we've said before, to do that. You can also remap your controls, which I really appreciate. A lot of console games don't allow that. And there you can have your rewind speed, which you can adjust as well. So it's, again, this is fairly basic stuff, but it does the job fairly well, in my opinion. What it does do well. So yeah, there's not too much more to say about it. Based on the couple of levels that I played already, if you're going to be into this kind of game, then you're already sold on it, I think. But if you did pick up Gleylancer from my last video and you enjoyed that, I think you'll enjoy this as well. If you enjoy shmups in general, I think you'll enjoy this. And again, it's nice to see these little pieces of history getting modernized and have a decent job done with them. So I think it's definitely worth checking out if you're a shmup nut like me. So yeah, that is Gynoug. I'm sorry, I don't know what to call it, but it is out now on consoles, not on PC, unfortunately. Hopefully that will change at some point, but it is a good time. It's a quality shmup done in a reasonable quality package, and I think you guys will enjoy it. So yeah, thank you very much for watching, everybody. If you did like what you saw here, please do all the YouTube things, like, subscribe, hit the notification bell, and leave a comment down below. Tell me what you think of this. Did you play this game back in the day? Are there other games from this era, Genesis, Super Nintendo, even 16-bit computers, that you'd really like to see modernized like this? There's a lot of them, so I'd love to know what you guys would like to see about that. And as always, you can follow me over at twitch.tv/pxabstraction for multiple variety streams a week, including a lot of indie stuff that we don't cover over here. We have a great community there, and I'd love to see you all. Thank you for watching, everybody, and I'll see you on the next Indie Showcase. You folks have yourselves a good one. Take it easy, everybody.